All right, well, we will call the meeting of the Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee to order. And I guess the first item is apparently approval of minutes. So they were included in the packet. We need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. All the ayes? Yeah.
Aye.
All right. Approved. Okay. Public appearances. Anybody here to speak? No? All right. Agenda review. Looks like we're getting some updates and everything. Anybody have anything they want to add? No? All right. We'll move right into it. So agenda items, updates on the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative.
Yeah, so I'll start off on that. There were several questions at the last meeting. So we figured we'd take part of the opportunity of this meeting today to follow up on some of those questions. So I included a few, maybe not answers, but ways we can work on those answers in the packet, in the memo in the packet. I'll just kind of go through those questions quick, and then we can, anytime along the way we can have discussion about them. But so the first one was the role, clarifying the role of this committee, the Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee, and how it fits in with the Healthy Neighborhood Strategic Plan. And in the ordinances that establish the committee, it is pretty broad. And I have the quote from the ordinance here in the memo. I'll just read it out loud. The committee shall advise the Common Council on matters related to the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, strategic plan action items. So that was one, and I guess to back up a little bit, the entire premise of this memo and update is talking about maybe the potential of updating the strategic plan. It was a pilot program that was kind of seen as a five-year program from 2019 through 2023. So exploring the role of the committee a bit more and developing some more specific roles for the committee might be something that we could do as an update to that plan. And then a couple of the other things that were discussed at the last meeting that we wanted to follow up on were the addition of the Southdale neighborhood now that is within the city of Fitchburg. That's another thing that we think could be addressed through a plan update. It was always, within the plan document, it was envisioned that once Southdale was incorporated into the city of Fitchburg, it would be incorporated as one of the priority neighborhoods. And then I think let's see, that about covers it. Later on under the department report, Deanna will be overviewing some of the reporting on the grant recipients, so I won't get into that here. But I did want to note in the memo that grant program is not necessarily tied to the strategic plan, the funding for it, so that can continue beyond 2023 without necessarily needing the plan updated first. I think that was another question that came up. So those were, I guess, some of the updates that I wanted to provide on questions that were raised at the last meeting. Any questions or comments on anything?
I have a question. So then at the end of 2023, I just don't know the procedure for this, but for the grant program, does the council have to approve? Does it become like the council has to approve on a yearly basis? Is it another 5-year? Or I guess I just don't know what happens to the grant program after 2023, I guess.
So the grant program has to be, I think in the past, it's had to be authorized by council and funded by council in the budget every year. So that would continue to be what would need to be done is including it in the budget, including funds for it in the budget after 2023. So yeah, does that answer your question?
All right. No.
I have another question. So based on what you said, would you then be recommending that we do revisit our strategic plan for this committee? Or no, that we just leave it until 2023 when the committee either resolves or something?
That's a good question. I would say that yes, we're thinking the plan should be revisited. Not sure what the timeline or funding for that would be, but yes, we are thinking that the plan should probably be revisited at some point in the near future.
All right. Anything else? Any other discussion? No. All right. So agenda item 5B, Teen Center feasibility study request for proposal. We get an update on that.
Yeah. So in the packet, in that memo, included a summary of the Teen Center RFP, which was also attached to the packet. So this was something that staff was tasked with, developing a feasibility study for the second phase of the Teen Center. Phase one was that engagement, the community engagement report that was that we discussed at the last meeting a few months ago. And so phase two is a feasibility study. The funding was included in the 2022 budget for that. So we've been working on developing an RFP for that feasibility study. The RFP in the packet is the current draft of that. And so what we've kind of been working through is what questions need to be answered in the feasibility study to ensure that the project would be a success. So, in the memo, I overviewed what we'd be looking to better understand, and that includes things like the operational parameters, program options, partnership opportunities, the physical space needs based on those programs, site characteristics of a teen center, economic and operational feasibility, and understanding any potential barriers that there might be. Within that RFP, that's broken down. Those questions are kind of broken down into several components in this draft: the objectives and priorities, needs assessment and market analysis, preferred program and facility space, management structure and operational plan, the development concept, and then a capital budget and operational pro forma. So that's kind of the 6 parts that we have in here. And I put a few discussion questions in here to consider for discussion at this meeting. And there's one in here that I meant to include and didn't, and I'll just read that out loud right now too, is what other examples of teen centers are you aware of that could be a model for this? So that's another question to consider. But does anybody have any questions about the RFP or any of the, the 6 kind of components of it? And if not, we can move into the discussion questions and dive into those a little bit more. Yeah, sure, Joe.
Yeah, I had a few. So I know that in phase one, there was a lot of really intentional partnerships that other organizations brought to the table, sort of pro bono. One is here, UW Extension, as well as UW Health. I'm wondering if that's sort of an intention, the similar intention of this process to make sure that we sort of take any of the support that we can get on this. And then the second question was around involvement with youth themselves, because that was a very successful part of the first phase as well.
Yes, the intention is to continue that on page, let me just find it here.
Sorry, I breezed through it. Wasn't able to give it a hard read.
Oh, and this one's
So, yes, the intention, and perhaps we need to make it clearer, but the intention is that the entire process would be inclusive to all of the previous partners and any newer partners that we identify. And yes, we would foresee that the teens would be involved in a similar manner.
You might be looking for page 5 of the proposal where it talks about the large group discussion. Yeah, I was trying to have a recommendation of what page they might be
Yeah.
looking for. I think that they might possibly be interested in page 5 where it talks about working with diverse audiences / stakeholders, including blah, 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 and minorities. Minors? Oh, never mind. That's minorities, not minors. Okay, never mind. That might not have been what they're looking for.
Yeah, so that section that you're referring to on the top of page 5, and it also references Hart's Ladder of Youth Adult Participation on the previous page, neighborhood and comprehensive community engagement process, with the neighborhood and other city residents with an emphasis on the teen demographic, underrepresented populations, and minority and/or women-led organizations. Neighborhood landowners, neighborhood program and service providers, existing and potential government officials and staff. And then the following paragraph also discusses the recently completed contract with EQT by Design, in which they undertook a robust and comprehensive community engagement process to determine neighborhood needs, wants for the facility. And additionally, there are other planning partners that were heavily involved in the community engagement process led by Equity, including UW Extension and the Friends of the Fitchburg Teen Center. These partners will take an active role throughout the planning process. So that section was kind of intended to keep those partnerships going and keep everyone involved in the second phase of this.
Just a follow-up question to that. During the first phase, we had interns that were paid. Part of that funding was sort of built into the contract that Equity by Design took on themselves as a part of what they got. And then, sort of some additional fundraising was done to take on more interns. Is that intended to be a part of this process as well? I know we're only working with 30,000 here.
I'll have to, check into how that funding. I want to make sure that the city funds are properly spent, and just let me double check how those contract funds, if they went directly to the interns or not. I don't see any reason why we couldn't work that in to what we're doing in the second phase, but I want to make sure. I haven't had a chance to go back and look and see how that was put together, just on the financial side. So if you'll let me take a look at that, I will follow up.
Okay, I have a question and possibly a recommendation on this proposal. My question first is around the selection criteria. Can you tell me about who is going to do the selecting? Is that primarily just staff, or is that this entire committee? That's the first question.
That's a good question. The actual selection piece of it, we haven't discussed all that much yet. We've mostly been focusing on the, what the content of the feasibility study would be. So we'd be open to recommendations on that.
I can add some context to that. So for the first phase, there was a committee assembled that involved several members of H&I, Plus, there were a few staff members. So I remember Marlon Hanna, he's not with Fitchburg anymore. He was a police officer. Ryan, do you recall who else was on the committee? It was him, you.
I cannot remember who was on that committee.
Okay, yeah, there were several folks from H&I plus some staff. So I mean, it may that I mean I could probably think of some names to provide as well, and I think it might make sense to also have either some community members or potentially like some of the previous youth interns serve on the committee, or some folks from UW Health or UW Extension. I think any folks who have some level of familiarity with the project and where it's been so far would probably make sense.
Yeah, I think those are good ideas.
Okay, and then my recommendation on the selection criteria, I would love to give a little bit of background. When I read through the selection criteria, it occurred to me that there wasn't much of any sort of recommendation for a criteria based on, shall we say, diversity of experience. The one that came closest was number 4, familiarity with needs/wants of customers who would likely utilize the facility. But familiarity is very vague, and I don't know what that means, to be, honest. So given that on page 5, we're gonna have this contractor do like focus groups essentially, I'd love to see some sort of criteria that would say something maybe more like extensive understanding of needs and wants of customers who would likely utilize the facility, instead of just familiarity. So that's the recommendation.
Thank you.
I would also say, I don't know legally if you could do it or not, but I've seen in other things that people are contracted for it, like where there's some sort of preference. I don't want to say it like that, but like to BIPOC owned firms. Just because that's a population that we'll be serving, so it would be good to have that representation, but it would also, just for equity's sake, in the folks that we're bringing in and we're contracting through the city to do that.
Yeah, we can look into that. Any other questions or comments before we get into some of the discussion questions? Okay, so I think I'll start with the one that I missed on here first. What other examples of teen centers are you all aware of that could be a model for this proposed facility, if any?
It's been a while since I've worked with youth, I guess. And so I just, the one that sticks out to me is the Lucia Teen Center. But to be honest, I don't know what kind of programming they have there and how what the programming is like and how they're run. So I don't know. It's just one that comes to mind, but I'm not sure if that's the model that we want to follow.
No, there's one that's very far from here. But it's called Spark, and it's located in Ashland, Wisconsin. And I actually had the pleasure of visiting. It was started off of a prevention initiative for middle school students in the Ashland area, and it was it's run by Ashland County, and they actually utilized a former employee to take it on and run the space, and it's just a very vibrant space. It's very it's really co-led by like the youth that go there. They sort of helped design the space. They helped inform what kind of activities happen there. There's just a lot of like social emotional support. The other one I would recommend, it's excuse me, it's not a full-fledged like organization itself. It's part of another organization. Is in the Goodman Center, they specifically have a standalone building that's dedicated for teens. Blanking on the name of the building, but it's I think it's Ironwork, not Ironworks. Brassworks, yeah. So I would recommend that. I've been to several like youth-led summits and conferences, and there's just a pretty robust amount of programming that happens there.
What about the teen center in Stoughton? Stoughton. I've had a meeting with the mayor of Stoughton not long ago, and he spoke of their teen center. In fact, his own children attended the teen center, and it's very active. I don't know if there's an actual name dedicated to it, but I mean, I guess I would make an inquiry. We talked about the funding and how that came about. It's been there for some time, and from my understanding, it's very active. And there's also a teen center in Oregon. At least there's a facility. Joe, do you know is there anything out of that? I mean, I've had some other meetings there that they've used the facility for, but they call it a teen center, but I don't know if it's alive and well. So
yeah, I was invited a really long time ago to visit there, so I know the contact of the director. I can share that.
Okay, because I mean it's a nice facility, nice building. I will say that. So
I would also say that I think it's built into the RFP, but like just as a part of the process, there's a lot of like up and coming organizations that are doing some really innovative work. So it would just be a good part of the process to talk to them, because they may not have their own physical space. They may be utilizing different spaces, and they may be growing. That as we think of potential people to be in the space, that would, those would be people you'd want to talk to as well.
To that point, there's a really wonderful program that I know about out in Milwaukee. It's called We Got This, and I really like a lot of the programs that they do. But again, that's not really like a teen center per se. It's a great program.
All right. Thank you. That's a lot of examples that we can look into, so that's helpful. The next question, or the first question, is: are there any other essential questions the feasibility study should consider or try to answer to ensure a teen center would be successful?
So, I mean, just one thing I've just played around in my head with a lot as I've thought about this existing, is that there may be different like levels of, if several different organizations are going to be in one space, there may be levels to what each organization is able to sort of afford or contribute, right? So there may be organizations that that would be able to put, pay more in rent than other organizations would, whereas other organizations will be able to bring a lot more, value to the space and may not have the capacity to do that. So, I mean, I'm just thinking like there's school districts, right, that this space would serve. There's, a technical college system. There's, local government, human services departments. There's just there's corporations that may, like credit unions or banks. So there may be a different level of who would be able to afford what. I don't know how to address that in RFP or whether to just address that in the process itself. But that could be something just to think about in the sustainability piece.
Sure, thanks. All right, the next question. What are some potential measures of long-term success for a teen center? If anybody has any ideas on that.
Sorry, I'm the one doing all the talking. I would also if my colleague Taylor would like to say anything as well, I would invite her, but I'm not putting you on the spot. Do you? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor, and I work with Joe at Extension, and I'm a community youth development educator. I was a part of Phase 1 and working with the interns and giving them hands-on experience and really elevating their voice and being able to lead their own focus groups and design their own surveys. Am I just talking about what the...
Because I know we've talked a lot about the health, the determinants of health and things
Sure.
that would be just good to think about as you think about what this can contribute to the community.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting about this RFP and what's really exciting about ensuring that youth voice are a part of it is that from a public health perspective, we know that when we engage community members from the beginning, we know that greatly informs our work better than, kind of bringing them in at the last moment and saying yes or no to this. And especially with youth and advocating for youth as key stakeholders, they are experts of their communities. They know more than me about how they're going to use the teen center space. And what's great of what came out of Phase 1 is that youth were already discussing and talking about the social determinants of health, how their built environments, how their education, how access to jobs, all of these things that incorporate what makes them healthy, and then talking about how this teen center can be a space for that. In addition to being in a space, for them to be themselves, for them to be able to self-express, to feel safe, to explore, and as well as explore other avenues like jobs, like educational opportunities. And I think that here, especially, it's not just unique to Madison, but teen-specific spaces are pretty rare. There's lots and lots of programming for elementary age students and for young adults, but certainly teens, there's not a lot of spaces that people can identify, and that was a really salient point in the report. The really great report that Equity by Design said that, I think it was 80% of people could not even think of a teen-specific space here in Madison. So I think in terms of outcomes, I think in terms of why this space is important, you are giving youth an opportunity to shape their built environment, not only for their own health, but for the health of younger people as well. So some of the teen interns as well mentioned how they will be moving on, right? They won't be a teen anymore in a couple of years, but their work that they're doing is shaping this for their siblings, for their younger neighbors, their younger peers. It has generational effects. And then certainly as well, when we talk about young people wanting to come back to the city of Fitchburg or come back to the city of Madison, the teen center and the way that this process has been designed by giving them a voice, like in shared decision-making processes, they will have a unique shared identity and belonging to this space and to the city of Fitchburg. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would also add to that. I think one of the big kind of salient issues lately with youth, with everybody really, but particularly with youth, is mental health. So I mean, I think if we want to think about like a space that exists for teens, mental health should be a large component of it, and if there are organizations that are there that can to some extent help address those concerns and have youth feel like they belong somewhere, like their voice is heard, like they can help shape the solutions to some of society's challenges, that would be a good, I think, measure for long-term success. Like, is our community healthier, right? And did youth play a role in developing, those approaches?
Thank you. That kind of touches on another question that's here too. What partners might be fitting for a successful teen center, or what partners might be willing and able to be a part of it. I know, Joe, you said you've been working with a lot of them already, so I'm sure you have some ideas here, but some discussion on that would probably be helpful too.
Can I just say, as far as the potential measures of long-term success, I think that there should be some sort of measure of who is using the space and the programming, as far as, is it a whole lot of people from out of town are like coming in, or is this really being used by the local community?
Yeah, I agree with that. So one of the things Equity by Design did in their part of the process was they, sort of had their team compile a list of people that are stakeholders in the community that they should talk to. I know they spoke to me and I gave them a list. I'm sure they spoke to others as well. I would expect somebody that took on this phase of the process to be able to do the same thing. And since we're talking about the RFP, I mean, I think it makes obvious sense that, like, as we're looking for a vendor, that we have somebody that is able to build those relationships and able to, do solid outreach, or have those pre-existing relationships already. But I mean, just in terms of like partners that would be fitting, I would think there would need to be youth serving organizations, obviously. But within that, I could see any of our partners at the county, Dane County Human Services, Madison College, the Verona School District, the Madison School District. Like I said, I think smaller organizations as well as, kind of larger organizations could be a fit for a space. And I also think it makes sense that there be some level of like open space that's sort of just generally for the community. And something I had heard sort of in the discussion about this over the years is, teens aren't just independent beings all of themselves, like they have families. So, if there is like a broader community space that's open to younger siblings or to, parents or other relatives, and that it's a space that is also open to collaboration for people that may not have like an office or a permanent space there, but somebody who wants to contribute something, right? Like we have a huge university right next to us, and there's tons of people that have a lot of talents and abilities to be able to bring to the table too. I think it would make sense to have some sort of a financial institution there. A lot of our high schools have credit unions in them. And also, I think just in general, like a place where there can be the resource, like basic needs that youth might have, whether it be hygiene products or food or, this is going to be right near Little John's restaurant. So I'm sure like any of the spaces that already exist in the neighborhood could also want to contribute. Housing. I mean, the list is endless. There's just a lot of things that youth need. So I think there's a lot of people we can talk to.
I think it would be wonderful if we could preferentially offer space to minority-owned businesses.
I think it would be nice too if we had services like Briar Patch come in, and even if they don't have space there, but to do a little outreach. Briar Patch works with homeless youth, and so I'm assuming with the space you'll get, it would be nice to get all types of youth utilizing this space, and who knows what types of issues they're going to be presenting with. So it would be nice to have Briar Patch just be able to spend a few hours there, maybe a few times a week, and possibly doing outreach to some of these youth in case that's something that they're needing.
So Taylor and I actually did a focus group in the juvenile detention center with a group of 11 youth, and there were a lot of really innovative ideas that came out of it. But one in particular that two youth had mentioned was that if there were staff at a teen center, those staff could do outreach in different places in the community, including in youth justice, so that, for a young person that's transitioning out back into the community, that this could be, a welcoming space for them. It's almost like bringing the teen center beyond the walls of the teen center.
I think one of the other things that I've heard in discussing the teen center is that some youth in the community may be either caretakers of younger siblings, of other neighbors. They may be parents themselves, and so utilizing the teen center would be difficult for them if there was not also some opportunity for maybe some childcare, so that they could access the resources while still making sure that those younger people are taken care of during that time. So a partner that, a volunteer organization or community volunteers that could, provide some of that during other programming would probably be very helpful.
Hi again, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that all of these, this discussion around programs and what organizations can come in or what systems can be set up in place to address barriers within the teen center. I think what's wonderful about having teens be a part of this feasibility study is that teens will also be able to answer those questions. They will be able to have those youth designed solutions. And I think it's always really interesting to see, and I've worked on several projects in this way where what the adults said that the solution should be and what youth say the solution should be. And that's a really interesting spot to be, kind of in that in-between area. So I think with this, having teens be a part of it and discussing with them those difficult questions of, if teens are caregivers, can this space be a place where, yes, their siblings or neighbors can also have a safe place and they also can be a teen? And we'll be able to, with a lot of the extension and UW Health frameworks that we do in working with youth, we have lots of different models and lots of different techniques in order to have these difficult discussions around social inequities and access barriers and how it relates to health equity. But by and large, it's all can be done designed by youth, which I think is the most interesting and differing piece in all of this. That was it. Thank you.
Okay, last question that we had for discussion, and this is by no means all the questions that we might want to talk about. So if there's anything else after this that anybody wants to bring up, feel free. But the last discussion question we had here was what type of data should we collect to ensure that we understand and meet the needs that exist?
I think it's important to collect. I think it's important to if there's a way to collect how teens identify in terms of race, gender, culture, all those things. And I know that those questions can sometimes be sensitive, but I think it's important as well.
In addition, whether the youth in our community feel like they have a place where they belong, or whether they feel like they belong in our community. Before and after data.
I don't know how to, I don't know if teens necessarily know how to answer this question, but it would be nice to know too, like from what their socioeconomic background is. So, are we just hitting, middle to upper class youth, or are we getting a range of youth? And I don't know, if the teens are the ones answering those questions. I don't know if they'll necessarily feel comfortable or know, where they stand, I guess, in that sense.
I recently saw a questionnaire that had a lot of questions about the amount of, it was essentially for diagnosing PTSD. Some of the questions were very interesting as far as whether you felt like you had an internal locus of control or an external locus of control. Basically, do you feel like you have agency or control in your life? Do you feel like you have power? Questions like that could potentially be useful if reducing, it all depends on what our success criteria are, right? So if our goal for the Teen Center is to help youth feel better about themselves or feel like they're gonna be self-efficacious. So, if they'll have self-efficacy, going into the future, like they feel like they can handle situations, then maybe a criteria like that could be useful. But I think that the data we collect needs to be based on what our success criteria are.
I think in general, are the youth being served by the center empowered by, the services that are provided? Do they feel like they're heard and that their needs are being met?
One theme that I see brought up often is life readiness. So, life readiness can range from everything from all the kind of practical things, like do you know how to X, Y, and Z, to do you have those kind of advocacy skills to be able to, ask for and push for the things that you need. And I think that extends beyond teens, like it's young adults need that, and I'm seeing an increase in people in organizations talking about how to serve that 19 to 29 demographic as well. So it's like, what's going on in here helping contribute to that, and even further so, like can that age range be involved in some sense in contributing to a teen center, right? Can you get young adults involved and because they're near peers to teens, they can probably relate to teens, but also it would benefit them as well. And I would also think like the impact of a teen center on the broader community would also be something worth measuring. Like how do people that live in the neighborhood, like what tangible benefits do they see of this being there? How do parents, see their how do folks in schools, see the benefit of this place to them? How do volunteers see the benefits to them?
Well, jumping away from the data collection to go back to what partners might be fitting, the other thing that I was thinking of was that a lot of youth may not have, a lot of teens may not have people in their lives that can teach them life skills. So organizations that can come in and teach them how to do something like change the oil in your car, file your taxes, maybe a financial organization that can come in and help them understand, how do you fill out a W-2? Because they might have a job and they might have just, put down ones throughout all the forms because they had no idea what they were doing. And come tax time, they may not file their taxes, or they all of those sorts of things.
And I guess to go back to one of the other questions about community centers or teen centers examples, I was just looking on the Lucier Community Education Center website, and they do actually serve teens as well, high school. So that would definitely be something here in Madison that you could take a look at.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or suggestions on the RFP?
Thank you for taking the time to put it together. Looks really good.
Thank you.
Okay, so then I guess we move on to item number 6, report from department.
Give me a chance here. Sorry. Okay. I'm just going to give us all just a real brief update on, I'll talk a little bit about the current status of the grant program, of the H&I grant program. I'll talk a little bit about where we are with Neighborhood Navigators, and then a brief update on the hub. So hopefully you can all see this. This is the H&I grant program for 2022. $95,000 and a little bit more was awarded. These are the organizations that have been awarded this year. And there was a total funding available of $98,000. And so this year, fortunately, we were able to meet all the funding requests. There was actually 8 organizations that applied, and we were able to meet their funding requests. Coming up on the next steps, staff here in the planning department are wrapping up 2022 funding year. So right now we're getting in all the project reporting information from each one of the organizations that were awarded. And then our next step here to wrap up 2022 will be the disbursement of those funds. Then we will be kicking off 2023 funding year. The 2023 budget that council has passed included $63,000 this year, specifically for the H&I program. And then also council has allocated an additional $15,000 specifically for the Southdale neighborhood. As we discussed earlier, Southdale was previously identified as a future H&I neighborhood, and in the grant program this year, we will recognize that. We should be able to get out all the grant paperwork information out to the public in late January, late this year. And in early March, we will do a grant review program with a committee, and then return to the H&I committee, and then for council review probably in late to mid-March. So that's where things stand with the grant program right now. The Neighborhood Navigator program is continuing. I think we've had a great year. We have mostly been working with Carmen, and some of you might be familiar with her. We have been fortunate enough that Dane County has awarded us a new contract for 2023, so that program will continue into 2023. We should have some funds available to hire a second neighborhood navigator, so keep your eyes open for that information, for that job opening to be coming out. I just had one quick summary of one statistic out of the many statistics that we've collected with Neighborhood Navigators, but this year we were able to assist over 130 people through the Neighborhood Navigator program.
Does that $23,000 contract represent one position or a half of a position?
It represents 2 part-time positions at about 10 hours per week for the entire year.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a good question. It's a part-time position.
And last year we allocated 2 as well, but we were only able to fill 1, correct?
Yes. Last year, we did have problems filling the second position. We hope that we can fill the second position this time. If we cannot, we will continue the program with 1 position.
Just off the top of your head, do you have any idea why we were not successful with that second position? I mean, is there any specific reason? Council didn't allocate enough funds, or?
Well, these
I mean, the
funds,
dollars come from Dane County,
yeah,
but,
these
yeah,
funds come right through to us from Dane County.
right.
We were able to increase the salary significantly. So now we're going to be moving up to $18.40 per hour. So that's a significant increase. And it's a position that I think fits a particular
Sure.
kind of person that has that flexibility and is willing to really be committed to the community. And like I said, it's really only 10 hours per week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unique, and as you said, 10 hours, so
Yeah,
it narrows the pool a little bit, but
it does.
there is somebody out there that would be a perfect fit.
I have a follow-up question. Has it ever been floated as a possibility to just like double Carmen's hours, or has she ever expressed interest in that?
Actually, later this year, she did double up on her hours. We kind of had to watch the budget around, but she did increase her hours, and at least in my discussions late last year with Dane County, they were acceptable with that, and that's certainly a possibility going forward. I would need to check back with Dane County on that.
Okay.
Can I answer any other questions?
I know Carmen's been around for a while. What's her overall like take on the role and of like her own capacity and her own impact? It would be interesting to kind of hear from her perspective, like, you know, how everything's going and what we could do to kind of further support her work.
I can't speak for Carmen, but I'm sure that she'd be willing to come in and kind of give a recap for the year. That might be more suitable. Just wanted to touch base then on the current status of Hub. Actually, last year in December, Plan Commission approved the conditional use and the architectural design review for the Hub. So the Hub has all of its important planning documents all put together, and they have their approvals. It's my understanding that the construction documents are near completion, and we're still on track to release for bid in spring. I just stuck in a couple of, and you all have probably seen this, a couple of graphics. This was something that you probably saw back from Wade, but just kind of gives you a nice overview of the project location, for some reference. This is actually the site plan that Plan Commission approved. What you can see is very similar to what was already shown, nothing surprising. The parking area, the community building, the pickleball / basketball hard court. Up on the top here, I'm just showing the proposal for the playground that would be available for smaller kids, and then 5 to 12 also. So.
There was an issue that came about, I think, with Plan Commission regarding the stormwater through the center of the property. Do you know where that's at, and can you speak to it?
I will certainly try.
Okay.
That is still in the works. We've met with the property owner involved. There is a storm sewer that is cutting through the existing site. It goes approximately from here, kind of down this way, if you can kind of follow. It's a private storm sewer. It's not in an easement. And so that is going to have to be addressed, likely moved to a different location and reconnected. So we're still working through that. Hopefully we can get some resolve. maybe later next week.
So you probably don't know the answers to what the costs and things of that nature are associated with
I'm gonna-
relocating a storm sewer.
I'm going to leave that to the engineers.
Okay, all right, very good.
Just one more slide. I thought it was helpful to kind of look at, one of the things that Plan Commission does look at is materials and colors. And so this was something else from the packet that Plan Commission approved. So that is the summary of the department report, just to give you kind of an update on some of these big projects. I'm open to answer any questions.
What are we looking at in this last slide in regards to materials?
Yeah, so there's a brick material, there's a cast stone material. This is a siding kind of material that's here, another type of siding material, and then there's some colored materials. There's a mix of materials that'll be on the facade. So you're looking at the facade materials is what you're looking at. Yep. I wrapped up my department report. So.
All right, I guess we move to announcements. Anybody have any announcements? All right, nothing, then I guess anybody have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Need a second.
Second? Anyone? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned.